I'm live. We are going to be talking all about the cost of living today. We've got a special episode. So I am joined by Rosie as always, but today we've also got Daniel with us from our campaigns team, and he's going to talk to us just about the situation, which we know is having a huge impact on everyone. But I think first, before we get going with the questions and talking about the cost of living situation, I think we should just acknowledge that it's been quite a day for news with Liz Truss announcing that she has resigned as Prime Minister. So even more turmoil on top of month or two. So what does this mean for people with epilepsy? Just this kind of this news. I guess it's literally been an hour, isn't it? An hour or so.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of people were already facing a great deal of uncertainty, and unfortunately today's events have just made that even worse. So we were looking forward to the next kind of fiscal budget statement on the 31st of October.
Yeah.
It's not clear if that's going ahead anymore. So kind of the measures to deal with the cost of living crisis, particularly one issue that we've been focusing on, which is uprating benefits in line with inflation. It's still unclear what the situation is around that at the moment, and unfortunately the situation is getting unclearer by the minute, really.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. So obviously we're going to be taking your questions for the next half an hour, 40 minutes, but there might be just some things that we're not quite sure about yet, just because of all the uncertainty at the moment. So we will find out, but it's been quite a week. And not just because of the news today, but Daniel, you were doing loads of interviews yesterday about the cost of living as well.
Yeah, so we kind of launched our cost of living campaign yesterday. So I was talking to BBC radio stations across the country about the findings of our survey. So in August, before the cost of living crisis had kind of even reached its peak yet, we were hearing from people who had completed our survey that they were already experiencing more seizures due to the stress of worrying about the cost of living crisis this winter. People who are feeling more isolated because of a lack of money and not being able to go out. People having to already make those choices about whether to skip meals, whether to not turn the heating on. And unfortunately, again, with all the uncertainty at the moment, that situation is only going to get worse.
Definitely, it was really difficult to read some of the results. We did a survey, as Daniel said, back in August, just asking people with epilepsy how they're finding the whole situation, and it was really hard. Some really hard results, like 2 in 5 people said that they're already experiencing more seizures as a result of the stress, and that was before October, before things started to rise even more. So there was other things, wasn't there? People not going out.
Yeah, 2/3 of people saying they were feeling more isolated due to having limited money. 65% of people experiencing more stress due to the cost of living crisis, and then that feeds into then the 2 in 5 people having more seizures because of that stress. We know that stress, skipping meals, losing sleep can all be seizure triggers. So this kind of situation is building up into a kind of a perfect storm for people with epilepsy at the moment. So it's important that as part of our cost of living crisis, we really are getting that message out to the government as it is, and making that case for people with epilepsy to get the support they need.
Definitely, and I was speaking to one gentleman who actually did some media interviews with you yesterday. He said that his seizures have been getting worse because of the cold, so cold's a trigger for him. So he's noticing that, and then that's getting him quite down as well, obviously, as you'd expect, and struggling to find work. I guess, Rosie, you talking to people all the time on the helpline at the moment.
Yeah, it's definitely increasing the amount of people who are contacting us about it. And Daniel already said it, and I think we're going to hear it a lot. It's the uncertainty that's really scaring people. So we're often the calls have been more, where can I get the help? When can I get help? Which is completely understandable. Yeah. And I think I'm glad that people are calling us now and are looking for that support now, because it's good that you're sort of trying to get it as soon as possible. And other organisations that we've looked into and that are also supporting people with disabilities, you see that a lot. It's saying, look for the support as soon as you can. And there is support out there. We've got information about cost of living, and we've got information about anxiety and looking after your mental health. And honestly, most charities, when you're looking at them now, it's the first thing on the website, which is great. I mean, it's unfortunate that we're having to go to charities to look for that support.
Yes, so
but it's great that it's there. And there is things, you know, like if you are really struggling with your mental health due to what's happening, there's our information, there's charities like Mind, and you can go to your GP and talk to counsellors and ask for that support. And I think I often talk to people who feel a bit as though they're taking up people's time or they're asking for too much, and you're not. I can feel that way, but really trying to look for that support is important.
Well, yeah, I think that's important because a lot of people are going to be in the same boat this winter, and while we represent people with epilepsy and we know it's going to be difficult for people with epilepsy, loads of people, not just disabled people, everyone is going to be in a very similar situation this winter. And I think the kind of the point you made about the impact on mental health as well as people having more seizures, the stress and the anxiety is going to build, and there's going to be a lot of pressure, unfortunately, on those health services this winter.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why we're holding today's session, just so that you can ask those questions, or at least you can maybe get some tips or things from other people watching as well. So that's what today's about. And it's also been a big week for you because on the helpline we've got a new web chat thing. So if you've not thing, but it's a proper web chat function. So if you want to go on and chat to the helpline people, you can, can't you?
Yeah. So we just started it, I think, on Monday.
Yes.
I hope I got that right.
Brand new website as well in the last week. So it's been really exciting. But tell us about the web chat.
So it's exactly as it sounds. It's a web chat. Pops up as soon as you go on the web page, which is odd for us. We've been going onto the website so much, and suddenly you get asked if you want help, which is really nice. And it's been used a lot. There was a bit of, because we haven't had, or since I've been working here, I haven't had anything like that. So there's a bit of unsure how much people are going to use it, and it's been used loads, which is so great. And being able to support people who might not feel comfortable or ready to have a phone call, or who struggle with emails and things like that, which is understandable. It's great that chat's there too. So I'm really glad about that. Was lovely to be a part of.
Definitely. So if you're watching, or you're watching this back after, just remember that that's there, because sometimes you don't always want to pick the phone up, you just want to chat to someone sort of in a more relaxed way, so that's there as well for the future. And
it really is someone. I think a lot of the time you see those chats and you think, oh, this is going to be a bunch of questions and no one's going to be there, but it's us, which is nice. You're chatting to an actual member of the team, so definitely not alone. Should we get straight through to questions? We've just had one through from Stewie, who's a highly qualified teaching assistant. And Stewie said that over 200 jobs that they've applied for, no interviews, and that he just wants to work. I guess we hear this a lot. Employment is such, in terms of the cost of living thing, it's not just the cost of heating, the cost of food. I think for people with epilepsy, work is such...
Well, we know only 42% of people with epilepsy are in employment, which is amongst the lowest rates for people with disabilities, and it is something that we've previously kind of campaigned on, the employment rate. I mean, a couple of years ago it was down at 32%. Thankfully it has increased somewhat now to 42%, but it is still a huge issue. And on our website we do have the employers toolkit that people can share with their employer or potential employers to give people a bit more understanding about the condition, because some of the research that we've done into employment and epilepsy has found that one of the barriers to people with epilepsy getting into employment is kind of just that misunderstanding and stigma from employers, and that's something that really needs to be addressed to help more people with epilepsy get into work and importantly stay in work as well, because one of the things we hear all too often is people who are diagnosed whilst in work and then are pushed out of that job.
I think one thing that crops up from that is there are employers out there that do support people with disabilities or are aware of that. And I speak to some people sometimes who've gone for jobs and chosen not to tell them they have a disability or something like that. And then it hasn't been a nice environment. They've felt they wanted to leave, or as you said, they've been pushed out. And there are employers out there who are going to support people with disabilities. There's something called, I think I've spoken about it on here before, it's the disability confident employers, And once you notice it, you'll see their logo everywhere. And I do know a lot of people with disabilities will often just apply for those roles, which is a shame, and you don't have to do that. But knowing that this scheme is out there and these employers have signed up to it can be quite comforting in going into that position. And it does mean that if you meet the minimum requirements of that role, you're guaranteed an interview if they're signed up to this scheme, which is also quite comforting, and you know you're going to get that support.
I think access to work as well is another thing that isn't very widely known. So that's something that can help with kind of paying for adjustments that can get people into work. Well, it's when you've got a job you can access to work, and one of the things that we've been calling for is for access to work to be available to people who are seeking a job, to make it easier to get into a job in the first place.
Yeah, I think knowing your rights is also really important. If I'm talking to somebody and they're asking about looking for work, I often say it's a good idea to know what you're entitled to and how you should be treated. Knowing what the laws are around if you need to disclose your disability and when's best to do it, because then you're going for the right jobs.
Yes, exactly.
And you've got that information and knowledge behind you. So it's always scary going for interviews or having these conversations, but you've got that bit of extra information. And and we've got it on our website, is contact the job centre. I think sometimes there's a bit of a stigma around going to the job centre, and there does not have to be. They're there to support you, and getting that extra advice or someone else also looking out for jobs that might help is great.
Exactly.
I think sometimes it's useful to utilise that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that came up a lot during the employment campaign was that question of when and whether to disclose epilepsy to an employer, and it is a really difficult conversation to have. But I think it is important to be upfront about that and to make sure that those adjustments to help you get into work can be put in place, because if the employer doesn't know about the epilepsy, then they can't make those adjustments to support people.
Yeah, I think so in some cases, definitely. I think it's worth looking into how much support you feel you need to get as well.
Yeah.
I've definitely spoken to people who have been asked by their employer they need all of this extra support and all of this stuff's been put in place, and actually they didn't need it. They've been seizure free for 12 years or only have seizures in their sleep, and their employer asking if they wanted padded tables, and not having that understanding can also be an issue. Yeah,
definitely, which I think is where our employer toolkit comes in as well, helping employers with that understanding, because it is such a misunderstood condition. And it is really difficult to understand all the aspects of it, but just that little bit can make a huge difference. Just the attitude of employers is such a huge factor, really.
Be make or break, can't it? But Stewie, I'm sorry you're having so much trouble applying for jobs. It must be very frustrating, but it sounds like you've got lots of really valuable skills, so please get in touch with maybe our helpline, have a look on our website, and they'll be able to talk you through a lot more about your situation, and then point you in the right direction. But good luck. Ems Jane has asked, how are people surviving both with the cost and also the gamble on mental health? I guess it's very early days, but
like I said already, we heard some very harrowing stories from people as part of the survey. People who are already making those decisions about skipping meals and not heating their home as much. And it is really difficult, unfortunately.
So we know people are having a really tough time, and I think like we've said earlier on, it's that impact that it has on mental health. So
definitely.
It's we've already been through COVID, and this just feels like it's just a whole other hurdle now.
I said it, and I'm sure I'm going to repeat it a lot. But asking for that support, great that somebody's already messaged and are aware that they're struggling with their mental health, and then seeking that support is so important. And as soon as you recognise it, to start looking for that. And sometimes that's the scariest thing. We get a lot of people who call and we're the first person they've spoken to, and just taking that step is amazing. But starting to look after your mental health now as well. It may not be that somebody starts to struggle more as the months go on, but it is a possibility that things could get harder and may get harder, in which case getting those things in place now where you can look after your mental health is so important. We've got advice on our website about how you can look after your mental health, and we have an online course that can be helpful as well.
Yeah, that's been really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And there are other organisations, there's Anxiety UK and Mind, and I think it's the Mental Health Foundation, hopefully I've got that one right, that are all there with extra advice, which I'd really recommend. It's really easy for me to say it sat here and not, having a chat with you guys, and actually doing it is the harder step.
That's the hard bit, but
Yeah.
we have actually had a few more questions in, just from people saying, why is it so hard? Oliver's just asking, why is it so hard to meet people with epilepsy? It's hard to find someone trustworthy to talk to, and a few other people are talking about kind of wanting to meet people. So I think we do have groups which are an absolute lifeline. They're both kind of in person and virtual, and we know that they have a huge, especially because of the mental health impact, you're not alone.
Yeah, I mean, just knowing that there are people who are experiencing the same issues as you and getting that support can make a huge difference. And I think that's something we hear all the time from our groups is just meeting other people with epilepsy and understanding that you're not alone can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I think you spoke to someone on the helpline recently, didn't you, that he's going to join one of our groups. He's got some really helpful advice that helped him get PIP, our personal independence payments. So he's going to get some extra financial support. He's going to join one of our groups, and that's just such a nice story to hear.
Yeah, and we do have those groups, which is amazing, and I've definitely heard good things about them, which is lovely. But I do know that I talk to some people who aren't ready for that. They're not ready to have a virtual group, or a local group isn't in their area, and that's completely fair as well. And I think sometimes people feel guilty, which they absolutely shouldn't. But if you're not comfortable with that, there's also online forums like Health Unlocked. We have social media where you can ask questions if you need to. And I've spoken to somebody, or I've spoken to a number of people, who actually found our videos helpful, where it's interviewing people who have epilepsy, because although you're not speaking to someone, you can see them there and they're talking about what they went through. And that, although it's not the same as what he was asking, that is there for you as well, which can sometimes be quite easy or comforting.
Yeah.
And I think people don't necessarily talk about their epilepsy very much, which is why sometimes you feel as though there's no one, and then slowly but surely you realise actually there's a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we hope that's helpful, Oliver. But there are loads of ways, whether it's you are ready for a group, either virtual or in person, or just like Rosie said, social media.
Yeah.
Loads of people I've seen made friends that way, and it's just those lifelines are really important more than ever right now. If you're just joining us, we are talking about the cost of living campaign that we've launched yesterday. It was a busy day, wasn't it, Daniel? Because obviously we had all these plans for speaking to, because we wanted to get it out there in the public, and it's been such a tumultuous time with the government. But we still got lots of interviews, didn't we, with BBC?
Yeah, BBC across the country, some local TV, other local kind of commercial radio stations, and hopefully we've got Talk TV on Saturday interview.
Yes.
And then hopefully we'll have some more interviews in the coming weeks, and it's not something that we want to just kind of launch and then forget about. It's something that we are going to keep working on throughout the winter and into next year, because it unfortunately it's an issue that's not going away. And with, again, the change in government now, or the change in Prime Minister and the uncertainty that's created again, is something that we are going to need to make sure is at the forefront of the new Prime Minister's mind. And I know we're working with other charities as well. So we've signed a joint letter to the Chancellor ahead of the planned budget on the 31st of October, whether that's going to go ahead or not, to make sure that was with other neurology charities. So that was making sure that people with neurological conditions are taken into consideration. And then with the change now in the help with energy bills, so initially that help was going to last for 2 years, and now it's going to end in April next year. But after that, there will be targeted support continuing. So there will be a review into how that support is going to be targeted, and we'll be making sure that people with epilepsy are in that conversation, and that we're kind of making sure that people with epilepsy get that support as that scheme kind of rolls out from April or onwards.
Definitely. So we are in touch with politicians and MPs and telling them how this situation is affecting people with epilepsy. But if you've got a story to tell, or you just want to, not necessarily in the media, but if you just want to tell us how things are affecting you, so we can then get that out there, then please get in touch. I think we can't do our work without people telling us how it is.
Yeah, I mean, having those personal stories makes such a big difference in making that argument to MPs and decision makers. Especially if people are able to contact their own local MP and explain how the situation is directly affecting them. That is really powerful. And I know sometimes it can feel like you're not going to get an answer, or your voice isn't going to be heard. MPs, especially now, will be listening to what their constituents are saying. Yes. And making sure they're trying to represent those voices in Parliament. Exactly.
So please do share, get in touch with us, or get in touch with your MP, and talk to them. Joel O'Donnell, I think I've said that right. Are there support groups for people in a relationship with epilepsy? I think you mean a partner of someone with epilepsy. So anyone, a partner. So, but are there support groups for partners?
We don't have any groups that are specifically just for partners. Our virtual groups and face-to-face groups can be for people who are affected by epilepsy. So it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who has epilepsy, although that does tend to be the majority. But it can be for people who are affected. But no, we don't have ones just for partners. Although I have been asked about that before. I do know that from people I've spoken to, social media and online forums tend to be where people who are partners with somebody who have epilepsy ask the questions. And maybe that's something that people would look into in the future. But at the moment it's not something specific that we have.
If you think it's something you'd like to see, then please get in touch. And if anyone else watching wants that as well, obviously, because I guess it's a very different thing. If you're a partner, you might have things you might want to say away from that partner, or
no, we talk to a lot of partners.
Well, I think that hits on a wider issue as well. People with epilepsy and their families are people that we represent, so it's not just the person with epilepsy, because it has a much wider kind of impact. So it touches on an important point there, definitely. Just ask away if there's anything like that you'd like to see that we should be doing. Claire, we've already talked about this earlier on, but uncertainty doesn't help with people's stress and anxiety. And you're really right, Claire, that uncertainty can be a huge trigger in itself, and then that can... it adds to that stress and anxiety, doesn't it? Not knowing what's happening, and regardless of your kind of political affiliations at the moment, I think the one thing we need is stability, and to know what's happening. The constant U-turns over the last few weeks have not helped anyone. We do need to know what's happening this winter and into next year. And one of the points I made during my interviews yesterday was the toing and froing on the whether benefits are going to be uprated in line with inflation. That can't continue. We need an answer on that as soon as possible. Because I know a lot of people with epilepsy kind of rely on their benefits, and they've been kind of stagnant and too low for far too long now, so they need to be increased as soon as possible.
So tell us a bit about the benefits situation, because it is very complex, isn't it? But, and that's part of the problem. It's people with epilepsy often struggle to understand, and not just people with epilepsy, but anyone really. When you look at the way some of the system is created, it's just an absolute minefield. So can you sort of explain in...
Well, no, it is really difficult. I think there are quite a few benefits out there that people might not be necessarily aware of. I think I mentioned access to work already, which is something, again, that's not widely known, that can help people with epilepsy and other disability conditions in work. Carers allowance, I think, is another benefit that's not well kind of publicised or known about, and that's something that you can get money for if you're looking after someone, so it's definitely worth kind of looking into that benefit and others. There's plenty of benefit checkers online where people can go input their kind of personal situation and find out what other benefits they might be kind of eligible for. I mean, the main ones we kind of work with at the moment are personal independence payments, which has historically been it's been very difficult for people with epilepsy to successfully apply for. Thankfully, that seems to be moving in the right direction. We are kind of hearing that more people are successful, but there are still plenty of people with epilepsy who should be getting PIP who aren't. And that's something that we'll continue working with both PIP assessors and DWP to make sure that people with epilepsy are able to get PIP. And then obviously there's universal credit now, which in theory was supposed to simplify the benefit system and bring a lot of other benefits under the universal credit one umbrella benefit, and it's not really worked as well as it should do from kind of our point of view. And again, it is very complicated system of what you'd get and when, and it's impacted by whether you're how much you're working and how much you're paid. So it's a very complicated system, and it is difficult to kind of get your head around sometimes, which isn't helpful for people with epilepsy and other disabilities when all you're looking for is a bit of help and support.
Yeah, especially we know a lot of people with epilepsy might struggle with memory, processing information, so it almost feels like they've thrown in more barriers already. And actually, Rachel, you've just read my mind. I was just going to ask Daniel, why is it so hard for people with epilepsy to get PIP? That's a question from Rachel.
Well, I mean, partly it's the way the system's been set up. The assessment questions aren't suitable for people with an invisible and fluctuating condition like epilepsy.
Yes.
And it is very difficult for people then to explain how their epilepsy kind of impacts them on a daily basis. And one of the things that we tell people, and it's unfortunate, but you have to kind of try and explain how epilepsy kind of affects you on your worst day to try and make that case as strong as possible. And it can be, I mean, it's not nice to think about, so it can be uncomfortable for some people trying to explain that to a complete stranger, really. And I think, again, the way the system was set up in the first place, it was almost set up to kind of deny people benefits. Thankfully, the system has improved somewhat. So I think we have seen a recognition that epilepsy is an invisible and fluctuating condition, and the assessment has changed somewhat in to recognise that. But it's still far from perfect, and that's again something that we'll keep working on.
And if you need support in that, we do have a lot of information on our website about how to fill in that personal independence payment form, and you can also call Citizens Advice. And it does feel like a lot. They're not easy forms to fill in, as Daniel just said.
No.
But trying to do it as well as you possibly can first time round can be really helpful, because we know that, well, I've definitely spoken to people before who will call and say, actually, the first time I did it, I don't think I did it right. So looking and researching into sort of how to answer those questions, as Daniel just said, is really important. And it's upsetting to do and difficult, but it's important.
Well, and those forms are so complicated. They don't make it easy, unfortunately. And it is very difficult, and we have some advice on our website about the kind of evidence that is helpful to provide as part of that process, because it's all too easy to provide things that the DWP are just going to ignore. But that list of advice on our website is directly from the PIP advisors, so that's kind of what the evidence that would be useful is that they're looking for.
Like having to get into their mindset almost of how you're going to be assessed, so that you can get it across in the right way. But it's challenging, but there are, like you say, there is support out there.
Yeah, there is, and it is. We've got a full web page just dedicated to PIP, which is really useful, and I'm glad we have that, because it is how we're supporting people, and we do know that it is very difficult to do at the moment.
So if you do get successfully get PIP, what does that allow you? Because a lot of people might not know what PIP is, or what does it allow you to do?
There's two components. So there's the mobility component and the daily living component. So I can't remember the figures off the top of my head, but it gives you an amount of money per week to help with the cost of living with a disability. So you can claim PIP while you're in employment. It's not a kind of a replacement for job seekers allowance. It is it's not means tested, so it doesn't matter how much money you have already. It is there to meet that extra cost of living with a disability like epilepsy. So the daily living component is looking at help you might need while you're at home, so cooking, washing, that kind of thing. And then the mobility component is about kind of outside the house and travelling. So there are two components, and you can get the two rates of either, so that you can get a mixture of kind of four rates almost. Yes. So again, it's very complicated.
Within that,
we've got like a table on the website that I have to look at because it is complicated. Yeah. But I've definitely spoken to people who misinterpreted what PIP is and PIP is, because as you said, it's quite confusing. It is, but the extra costs, it's not like universal credit or something like that. And I think sometimes when somebody realises how much it is, they were expecting it to be a lot more. So it's the extra costs, not something like universal credit, which is important because I've definitely spoken to people who've misinterpreted it, which is fair. But
it's understandable. I think one sad thing that I've spoken to two different people in the last few weeks who they get PIP, but then they've started to have to take the bus because the taxis are getting more expensive. So this is one of those knock-on effects that we're hearing about, cost of living wise. But then obviously taking the bus, they don't feel as safe. So that adds on to your anxiety. There's a whole, it's just such a knock-on effect. And Claire's just commented that epilepsy is a condition that can't be answered with just yes and no's on forms. I think that's a very good comment, Claire.
That goes to why people with epilepsy are often unsuccessful in claiming PIP. It's not an easy answer. It's not an easy condition to understand. And a lot of the PIP assessors don't have that kind of in-depth knowledge of epilepsy to understand the impact that it has. And far too often as well, we hear of PIP assessors who don't take people on their word. We hear about people PIP assessors writing inaccurate reports and not reflecting what people have told them. So even when you are explaining how epilepsy affects you, that's not then reflected back in the PIP report that's written.
Yeah, I think I've heard some people say it's almost like they're reading a report about a different person entirely. They're like, what conversation did we have? It just doesn't reflect. Yeah. But it is getting a bit better, but not quick
slowly getting better. Because at one point, people with epilepsy were, I think, the very lowest in terms of success rate at claiming a PIP. Yeah. And actually, during the pandemic, that kind of rate has increased quite a lot. In the same way that the employment rate has kind of increased during the pandemic as well. And I think part of that reason is they've been doing more assessments over the telephone or via Zoom or remote consultation. So that's made a big difference because, it's that stress. So people are not having to travel to the assessment centre. Yeah. That's less stressful. So that has made a big difference, I think. And going forward, thankfully, people will be given more of a choice of how that PIP assessment is made.
So that's a positive. And with universal credit, can you explain what universal credit is? Because how does that differ to PIP?
So universal credit is it replaces a few kind of older benefits, including job seekers allowance. But you can claim universal credit if you are in work. Yes, so if you're in a low income job, you can claim universal credit to top up your income. You can claim it if you're unable to work alongside PIP. So there's an assessment, a health assessment process, part of universal credit as well, similar to the PIP assessment, though similar but different because it's not assessing kind of the impact epilepsy is having on your day-to-day life in the same way that PIP is. So it replaces housing benefits. So there's a lot of different components there. So it's worth exploring if you do have epilepsy and you're able to work or you're in a low income job. It is worth exploring to see if you would be eligible for universal credit.
We have stuff on that on the website as well, don't we?
Daniel mentioned it earlier. There are sites that can show you what benefits you might be entitled to. Okay. So we do have a list of some of them on our website. So there's organisations like Turn to Us, So they have an online benefits calculator, and it's like a little sort of quiz, and at the end of it tells you what you might be entitled to. And often there's stuff out there, like you said, that you didn't know you were eligible for. I think you told me a little while ago about how people weren't aware that they were eligible for carers allowance.
Yeah.
And that is something that I also wasn't aware of, how many people weren't going for it because they didn't know. And Turn to Us have a phone number as well if you're not comfortable online. There's Citizens Advice. We do often have people calling us for benefit advice, and we do absolutely everything we can, but we're not trained benefit advisors, and none of us would ever suggest we were. So it can be helpful to contact trained benefit advisors as well, like Citizens Advice, because they could suggest what you might be entitled to, whether that is to look at universal credit as well and things. So definitely looking into it is really important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's kind of so many benefits. I mean, that people just aren't aware of them all. It's not possible to be aware of them all. And I think another thing that people probably aren't aware of either is that local councils also have discretionary funds that can help people with kind of housing costs and other things. And I know local councils are under a lot of pressure at the moment, but there is that help that they have. So it is definitely worth contacting your local council as well and seeing what help you might be entitled to through them.
And they may be able to support, signpost you to welfare units, or I know there's quite a few councils who are aware of organisations that are smaller charities that can help you in filling out forms, looking for what you might be entitled to. I've said it so many times, but it's true. There does tend to be a lot out there, it's just looking for it. And contacting your local council, you're totally right, is really important if you're able to, because there is a possibility that there's stuff in your area and it's likely that they'll know of it. Yeah.
Exactly. Basically lots of research and the helpline, our helpline can signpost you if you need more. Oliver's also talking about worries about people's safety due to the cost of living crisis. So as part of the survey we did just before October, 58% of people actually did talk about their fear of being able to afford bills, and part of that was people who need like alarms, seizure monitors, that sort of thing. They're just obviously worried about the cost of running those, and that's a huge factor as well, isn't it?
For some people it can be. I mean, we're not able to make recommendations or suggest certain alarms or if they're right for people. So we would never go into that in detail. We do have some information on our website about it and about different alarms and monitors, but we're not in a position to say if that is really important or isn't for some people. I think if some people already have them and do rely on them and find them helpful, it is then looking into getting some financial support, and goes back to all the things we were saying earlier about getting that financial support. Yeah, I think, it is that worry about things that you need to help keep, whether it keeps you safe, but it's the cost of running those as well. So I guess we'll have to watch and see what energy companies. It's hard to know at this stage. Yeah.
Again, as well as kind of the discretionary funds that local councils have, some energy companies will also have discretionary funds to help people with a disability. Yeah. So again, it is worth contacting the energy company and seeing what schemes they have in place to support people.
Yeah, because there's talk of blackouts, there's been potential blackouts. I don't know. I really hope, I don't know how we've come to this, but I think, I guess it'll be a watch and wait and see what energy companies now come out with advice-wise. Definitely. And as we go through the winter, we'll be keeping an eye on it and making sure as and when that we raise these issues with the relevant people, whether that's the government or energy companies or others, to make sure that people with epilepsy are represented and they are having their kind of views and needs taken into account. Definitely, because so if this is, as Daniel said earlier, this isn't just a one-off. We're going to talk about this now. This is very much going to be something that we'll be focusing on as part of the cost of epilepsy crisis campaign that we launched yesterday. But sadly, it's going to be it's going to be something going on for the next few months at the very least. And I guess just with the whole news about the government changing yet again potentially that'll be something to keep an eye on, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll, whatever happens next, we'll be making sure that we're raising this issue with the government, with kind of backbench MPs, to make sure that people with epilepsy's needs are taken into account, and people with epilepsy are getting the help and support they need at an incredibly difficult time.
Definitely. So if there's anything that you want to share your story, or you think that we need to know about this topic, then please get in touch, either on Instagram, or just there are many ways on our website, or email us, or call the helpline, people like Rosie.
Or the web chat.
Or the web chat. I'm losing track of all the ways you can contact us, but yeah, definitely get in touch. But yeah, thank you for everyone who's asked questions today, and just keep in touch and take care, and we'll see you very soon.